Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Thank you for joining me for this week's book review, where I am hoping to make sure that parents have the information that they need to make the right choices for what their children are reading. So with that, today's book review is Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. And this book is a young adult teen romance novel, and it is listed as clean and wholesome on Amazon. However, this novel is not the squeaky clean, wholesome romance novel that it boasts to be. And while it's better than Lynn Painter's Better Than the Movies, it does have some concerning and cautionary material for religious families. So stick with me today to get some more details about that book. So the premise of this book is Lena, Carolina, the main character, is spending the summer in Florence, Italy after the death of her mother months earlier. And she made a promise to her mother that she would go to Florence, Italy. However, in addition to dealing with the loss of her mother, she has no idea how to act around this man named Howard, who she is staying with. In fact, her mother never told her much about him until just the last 2 months prior to her death. So I'm going to read a little bit of the prologue to you just to give you a feel and an idea for the story and the writing style. And this part of the story in the prologue is prior to her mother's death. You've had bad days before, right? You know, the ones where your alarm doesn't go off, your toast practically catches on fire, and you remember way too late that every article of clothing you own is soaking wet in the bottom of the washer. So then you go hurtling into school 15 minutes late, praying no one will notice that your hair looks like the bride of Frankenstein's. But just as you slide into your desk, your teacher booms, "Running late today, Miss Emerson?" And everyone looks at you and notices. I'm sure you've had those days. We all have. But what about really bad days? The kind that are so pumped up and awful that they chew up the things you care about just for the fun of spitting them back in your face. The day my mom told me about Howard fell firmly in the really bad category. But at the time, he was the least of my worries. It was 2 weeks into my sophomore year of high school, and my mom and I were driving home from her appointment. The car was silent except for a radio commercial narrated by 2 Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonators, and even though it was a hot day, I had goosebumps up and down my legs. Just that morning, I'd placed second at my first ever cross-country meet, and I couldn't believe how much that didn't matter anymore. My mom switched off the radio. "Lena, what are you feeling?" Her voice was calm, and when I looked at her, I teared up all over again. She was so pale and tiny. How had I not noticed how tiny she'd gotten? "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I feel like I'm in shock." She nodded, coming to a stop at a traffic light. The sun was doing its best to blind us, and I stared into it, my eyes scalding. This is the day that changes everything, I thought. From here on out, there will only be before and after today. My mom cleared her throat, and when I glanced at her, she straightened up like she had something important to tell me. "Lena, did I ever tell you about the time I was dared to swim in a fountain?" I whipped around. "What? Remember how I told you I'd spent a year studying in Florence? I was out photographing with my classmates, and it was such a hot day I thought I was going to melt. I had this friend, Howard, and he dared me to jump into a fountain." Now, keep in mind, we'd just gotten the worst news of our lives. The worst. I scared a group of German tourists. They were posing for a photo, and when I popped out of the water, one of them lost her balance and almost fell back into the fountain with me. They were furious. So Howard yelled that I was drowning and jumped in after me. I stared at her, and she turned and gave me a little smile. Mom, that's funny and everything, but why are you telling me this now?" "I just wanted to tell you about Howard. He was really a lot of fun." The light changed, and she hit the gas. "What?" I thought. What? So that just gives you a little bit of the opening of the story. I really did want to like this story, but as we kind of keep going in this review, you'll sort of understand why. Definitely the story is quite tragic, and definitely as it's opening, like it's not opening like a romance novel like you would think, especially so after the prologue, she's now finished her sophomore year, so she'll be going into her junior year of school, and she's spending the summer in Florence with Howard. But as they're pulling up to his house in Florence, she realizes that he lives in a cemetery. It's a World War II memorial, specifically, and he's the superintendent of this facility, and so he lives like there. But it's a cemetery. She lives in a cemetery. So you can only imagine, like, you've just lost your mom, you're in a new country, and you're living in a cemetery. So Lena is certainly devastated by all the changes, and she's reeling from all the things that her mother really never told her. So for one, Lena has never known who her father was. And somehow there's the assumption made that Howard is actually her father. So that's one issue. Like, who's her dad? Who's this Howard guy? Is that her dad? Because she's definitely working from that assumption. 2, she's living in a cemetery just after her mother died. And then 3, she makes new friends from the local international school, which is where she meets her sort of love interest in the story, Ren, who does become her boyfriend by the end of the novel. In the midst of all of this, there's another character, Sonia, and so she lives at the same memorial facility that Howard does, and she delivers to Lena a journal that her mother had sent to her, and this is a journal that her mother had written during her time in Florence, Italy, and it sort of details a lot of her life and what was going on, and then the realization when she's pregnant with Lena. So Sonia believes that the journal was really meant for Lena, but by the end of the novel, Lena realizes that the journal was actually meant for Howard and not for her. Using the journal entries, Lena retraces her mother's steps to uncover what really happened between her mom and Howard, and she's hoping to get some insight about her father. Keep in mind, at this point, she's still presuming that Howard is her father. Lena does end up actually visiting her real father, her biological father, and it's quite clear once she meets him why her mother kept her hidden from him all this time, and why she never shared with her who her actual father was. Basically, in that, Howard and Lena come to an understanding that he does deeply care for Lena. He didn't really know that she existed, but he does care for her because it is her mother's, like, she's her mother's daughter. And so he really did love Lena's mom. And so with that, it's sort of like he's going to take on the responsibility to care for her. And so that is really actually a really sweet part of the story. Howard is a really great guy in the story, and definitely wants to provide for Lena and to care for her and to be that fatherly figure for her. If the storyline just and all that wasn't quite enough, Welch does add a whole extra layer where Lena is sort of pining after this hot boy at the international school. His name's Thomas. But of course, before the end of the story, she really realizes that she likes Ren, not Thomas. And so, but Ren at the time, he has like this Swedish girlfriend, and she's not happy about Lena's intrusion. So there's, you know, some stuff there. But there is some inappropriate stuff that sort of takes place. I would definitely recommend that if you want to know more about this book, or you definitely are considering it maybe for your reader, for your teen reader, then definitely go on to holdingsteadfastreaders.com and check out my full written review. You're going to see some more details. There are some inappropriate things happening. Obviously, Lena's mom got pregnant out of wedlock, and she was having essentially an affair with one of her school professors. And so I have way more details about some of that and some of the interactions. Anything that was like a cautionary wording, you'll find that on my written review. So I encourage you to kind of look over that. Addie is Lena's best friend in the States, in Seattle. And so the two of them early in the story are kind of keeping contact with each other. And through these interactions, we see a lot more of the boy crazy over Thomas and how, you know, attractive he is. And so there's some things back and forth. Again, check out my written review if you want to see specifically what some of those are. In the story, there are some inappropriate actions. They do attend a nightclub one night, and there's an older gentleman who starts to kind of put his hands on Lena, and another girl kind of comes to her defense, but she's very terrified in the moment and doesn't understand why, like, no one can hear her, no one's paying attention to her and what this man is doing. And so an added thing in there. I don't know that that was necessary, but depending on your reader and just the sexual nature of that, maybe, you know, definitely don't want them reading it. On page 128, there is a reference that young readers may not get. Ren has been absent from the group and he reappears with grass in his hair. And when he's asked about it, they make a joke that he says he was rolling down a hill, and they say a Swedish hill, and that's a reference to his girlfriend. So just reference like that throughout the story. So I definitely want to make you aware of that. There are a lot of references to alcohol use and drunkenness. And that's in the story quite a bit. So again, on my review, you'll find that there are a few examples of, you know, profanity in the story, and I let you know about where you're going to find those in the story. Just a few other like sexual references in the story. You'll find some of those on like page 205 and 206. So I definitely just want to make you aware of that, and definitely for something for you to go back and check out. Overall, I can see how this novel might have been considered like clean and wholesome comparatively. I mean, especially to some other book reviews that I have done in this genre that were definitely not clean and wholesome. So I think from a secular perspective, I can see where it's seen like that, for sure. But if you're coming from a biblical perspective, I know that this isn't something that I would want my daughter or my nieces reading, where, you know, a girl is trying to figure out who her father is, what kind of relationships her mother has had, and, you know, her mother never told her specifically, like, who her father was, and so there's references to, like, you know, one-night stands and relationships with professors. So those are not ideas that I would certainly want my daughter reading about or thinking about. And then the whole scene at the club, which there's more details about that in my written review. So I think for those who are of the same perspective that I am, like-minded values, that this book, unfortunately, Love and Gelato would definitely be a pass. There's better things to read, and I hope that this year I can find some more clean teen romance for those that are seeking those types of books out. But for this one, definitely probably going to be a pass. Definitely not as bad as some of the other books that I have read and shared this year, but not one that if you have a biblical perspective or worldview that you're trying to instill certain thoughts and ideas in our young ladies' hearts, this is not one that I would advocate for. So hopefully that review is helpful to you and helping you make the right choices for you and your family.